Section 1. Today we're going to be talking about federalism. It is titled One Nation and 50 States.
All right, is this chapter 11?
This is chapter 11, section 1.
Excellent. All right, slide 1.
Okay, under the main idea of federalism, some of the powers are reserved for the states, while some of them are shaped by states and the federal government, and some are reserved for the federal government. Tom, you want to talk a little bit about the key terms that they'll be going over?
I'd be happy to, Jim. Thank you. Key terms such as public policy will be basically a public policy is what the government of an area wants the general public to do. And then I think this is a misprint because a urinary system should be in a biology book, not in a civics book. Don't you agree?
I think that's unitary.
What is that?
Unitary system.
Unitary system. Well, that's completely different. Let's find out what that is. All right. So let's move on.
All right, so public policy. You guys, we are living in the world of public policy right now with this coronavirus. So our state government, led by our lovely governor, and the federal government, led by our equally lovely president, their policies are trying to be coordinated, but they're also fighting a little bit. So our federal system allows for a state level government to do some things and our federal government to do others. In the best case scenario, they work really well together, and these will come together, but they're not perfectly aligned yet. So you can see the difference if you just pay attention to the news right now.
Next item. Some of the choices that you have involve like trade-offs. Trade-offs, again, are best made through cooperation between our government, community, and the individuals. I think a lot of us are seeing that right now with the COVID-19 of how we're trying to work together.
Absolutely. I think like the takeout systems for all the restaurants here in town is a great example of that. You know, it's dangerous to have a public policy that's going to affect so many employees. I mean, we have former students who lost 3 part-time jobs because of they work in the restaurant industry in 3 different places. And so this public policy and the choices that we make has to be that balance between, you know, protecting the public and maintaining, you know, business survival. So the big term federalism, you know, this jumps right out of the 10th Amendment of the Bill of Rights. You know, all other powers go to the states, and federalism is the overwhelming, you know, the states get to do this, the federal government gets to do that, but there are then those shared powers in between, and that's what makes it a whole federal system. It's a layered component that makes our nation great.
Right, so with shared powers, it's something that we can both do. So if you listen to President Trump and the Department of Ed, there actually could be a nationwide closing of all the schools. That's not what they've chosen to do at this point. That's not what they've chosen to do. The states can also close schools, and so they both have that power. At this time, the states are the ones that are using it.
Some of the things that you're talking about, or you see in your slide, like things like taxes, and collecting of taxes, a lot about borrowing of money, who can borrow money. We talked a little bit about it previously in the future about court systems, but also really just in a sense about enforcing laws. And we really have no idea what's going to be happening here in the future as far as what kind of enforcement laws, if we have a shelter in place. But you're actually getting to see right now a lot of how our system of federalism works.
Another piece is the finances. So if at your house someone was laid off because of the coronavirus, correct, then that person, for the most part, will be able to apply for unemployment. Thank you. So that's one thing. Our state government is looking out for families and their financial situation, but our federal government is also doing that, where they're looking at the possibility of providing some tax breaks and possibly even direct payments to families, depending on a variety of situations.
I just read that they're looking into like the federal college loans to be frozen for 2 months, so that if you have a college loan, you don't have to pay in, but you also don't accrue interest on that. So that would be a good little help for things if they're, you know, young college students, finances get squeezed.
Next item.
Next is the unitary government. Absolutely. All right. And as it says up on the slide, it's a system in which practically all political power lies within a central government.
China.
In many ways, yes, China.
That's what you're looking at.
The old classic for my generation was Albania.
The old Albania. Yep,
Albania,
that's
yeah.
All right,
It's
next
on
slide.
the Adriatic.
right.
But yeah, that was such a total control system. You know, Pinochet across Central in South America, excuse me, also had that. Castro had a very strong unitary government in Cuba.
Saudi Arabia?
Yes.
Pretty obvious option, right?
Yep.
What do we got next?
Here in America, though, I don't think a unitary government would work very well. We have to have that concept of federalism where the states have to do something, the federal government had to do some things. You know, I think it's much more efficient and much more realistic. All right, let's get federalism in action.
Powers to the state. Those in favor of states' rights feel that the state government can better serve their people than the national government. So what we're looking at obviously is a balance and seeing who has more power. Is it going to be your personal state that you live in, or is the power going to come from Washington, D.C.? And, you know, right now with the COVID-19 crisis that we have, I think sometimes right now Washington, D.C. kind of has a plan, but also the states have a plan. And sometimes the states honestly are asking the federal government to do more. So we're at a real struggle right now as far as where we're at. Do we want to have the states have more power? Or do we want to have everything come from the federal government? You're going to get arguments on both sides. And I guess if I was going to add a little personal thing in this, I don't necessarily know we always want to have the federal government always there, always telling us what to do.
However, I was listening to some economists this morning, and they were saying that it would be better in this situation if the federal government would be the one ordering the masks and promising the private companies that they will put these orders in. We guarantee that we are going to purchase this many masks, this many hazmat suits, all of those kind of things, because then people will go ahead and retool their companies so that they can make these and produce these things. Where right now, each state is competing with the other state to get these items, and it's not being very efficient. So sometimes.
Can I put my history nerd hat on for a second?
Please.
All right, great example, ancient Rome, a guy named Cincinnatus. He was elected by the government in ancient Rome's republic to become a dictator in times of war. So he becomes a dictator, he raises his army, he goes, fights a battle, and he is back on his farm in 10 days. So in a time of strife like Rome had, it was invasions from the north, Cincinnatus, they granted dictator powers, and he got the job done, and then he gave them up. And I think, yes, I absolutely agree with you. You know, in times of disaster, we need to have that central piece. But we also have to have that sense that you got to let go, because it's going to come back to local control for so many things.
This I think would be really great for you as a civics student to talk to your parents about what they really think about the involvement of the federal government, and maybe they want to have more federal government, or maybe they want to have more state involvement in a sense as far as having the discussions. But like I said, this would be a great conversation that you can have with your mother or your father or your guardian.
Grandparents too, because they've lived through polio epidemics and whatnot. So.
And this doesn't always work, you guys, because case in point, Adolf Hitler. They created a crisis and then utilized that crisis to get the law passed, which would allow him to become essentially a dictator. So, you know, it ebbs and flows.
There we
See what we
go.
have next.
Let's see, what else we got?
Again, we've kind of mentioned this already about powers to the national government. I think Ms. Rinkenberger, you just talked about Hitler and the idea of what Germany did. And, you know, there's always this idea, is it better to have a large, strong central power, like maybe in a sense like using across the United States to solve these large problems, or is it going to be something better that you don't have such a large government, that maybe you have something smaller? Again, same things that we've been talking about already.
So if you have any questions about, you know, the separation of power between state and federal governments, absolutely, don't forget, always can shoot us an email and we'll get back to you on these. All right? All right, take a look at this pie chart. See, look at what a state government does. Is this pie chart in the chapter specifically?
Yeah, it's in the book.
It's in the book.
So, yeah, let's just keep moving on. You guys can look at it. Feel free to shoot us an email.
Right, it's pretty clear. It's a nice explanation of, you know, what our state tax dollars are spent on.
And notice how much is spent on education. You guys are what each state spends the bulk of its money on. So you are loved.
All right, pop quiz.
First question. Which two services make up more than 50% of the money that states spend?
Education!
Education. Let's see the answer here.
All right. The answer is
Education.
education and social services.
Social services, yes.
Absolutely. Two organizations right now that are working hard.
And last question, number 2. Which service gets the largest portion of the money?
Isn't that education?
You do. You students get the
Yeah.
largest portion. Okay,
What do
certainly
you-
it's not in cash, but it's in your education.
There you go. Education gets the single largest part of state funds.
Absolutely. Education is not mentioned in the Constitution anywhere. So because it's not mentioned in the Constitution, 10th Amendment applies, and it is a right and duty of a state.
Well, I hope you learned something today about federalism. We're going to be moving on to section 2. So we're going to pause right here. There is a little bubble there if you want to take a look at this, about the different ideas about federalism, dividing its power. Again, you can take a look at it. That'd be the last slide of your presentation.
Absolutely.
Have a good day.
See ya.